in the Talmud, in Pirkei Avot, Rabban Gamliel said, "Aseh lecha rav v'histalek min hasafek." You should make for yourself a teacher, and by doing so, you will be able to remove doubt. We know that Amalek is the same numerical value as Safek. The whole purpose of this Shabbat is how can we come to a place where we remove the openings for doubt. So Rabban Gamliel, the great sage and Kabbalist, says that if you want, he gives maybe the only way to separate yourself and make it so that doubt cannot manifest in your life is to appoint for yourself a teacher. Appoint for yourself a teacher. Appoint for yourself a teacher, and you will be able to remove doubt from it. The great Kabbalist, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac of Kamarna, in his commentary to Pirkei Avot, writes that when and if an individual appoints one person who he will listen to him or her all the time, then klipat Amalek, then the force of negativity, which is called Amalek, she'oleh safek, which is the same numerical value as doubt, umeorer kushiyot uminut, and it is the force that awakens doubt and uncertainty. Ukshetikasher atzmecha tistalek min hasafek. And if you really tie yourself to a teacher, then you are given the ability, not just through what you will learn, but simply the light, to remove yourself from doubt. So much so that there was a Kabbalist who writes, he says, what was the whole force of Amalek? The doubt, what was this root of the doubt that Amalek tried to awaken and really succeeded to some degree within the Israelites then and within us now? Shelot tzarich rav, that Amalek's desire was to awaken within the Israelites the thought they don't need a teacher. Maybe they know enough by themselves. They don't need to subjugate themselves to anybody who's a teacher to them. And through that, all the other doubts will come. Therefore, that really the Kabbalists in all of their writings say there's only one way for you to separate yourself or give yourself the merit not to be overtaken by doubts of Amalek. It's by making for yourself a teacher, appointing for yourself a teacher. Now when you hear this, you would think that it has to be, if a person has a merit, to have a teacher who's really elevated, who's really spiritual. You think that it's something you're going to learn from that teacher, that is what's going to protect you from doubt, or something that when doubts come, that teacher will be able to alleviate or in some way remove your doubts. But that's not what it is. Maimonides, the Rambam, writes an amazing thing concerning this teaching. He writes, "Afilu lo yeh ra'ui liot lecha lerav." Appoint for yourself a teacher, even if that teacher is not on the level of wisdom or spirituality or holiness, that he really deserves to be your teacher. But there's a power to appointing for yourself a teacher. Sim oto lecha lerav, ad shetidameh bo shehu melamed. Appoint him as a teacher, even if he's not a teacher who can teach you. But bring yourself to think, which is a strange thing, bring yourself to think that he can teach you. V'yaleh biyado ba'avur zeh limud ha'chokhmah. If you appoint somebody to be your teacher, basically you're telling the Creator, this is who I'm going to learn from. Even if that person doesn't have wisdom, even if that person doesn't have light, even if that person isn't the most spiritual elevated person, if you appoint him to be your teacher, the Creator has to send wisdom to this person to give to you. It's an amazing thing. כי אין לימוד האדם מעצמו כלימודו מזולתו. לימוד מזולתו יתקיים בידו יותר ויותר מבואר. אפילו היה כמוהו בחוכמה או למטה ממנו. If you appoint somebody, even if you're smarter than that person, even if you're wiser than that person, the way the spiritual system works is that if you appoint for yourself a teacher, then the Creator has to send to him for you wisdom. But this is only if you really appoint for yourself a teacher, which is, again, an amazing thing, because as we said, usually when you hear this teaching, which is a very important teaching, especially in the Shabbat from Rabban Gamliel, Aseh lecha rav yisalek min hasafek. If you make for yourself a teacher, then you will be removed from the forces of doubt and negativity, the forces of Amalek. You think, well, it has to be somebody, right? Rabbi Shimon, Moses in this case, or Rav Ashlag. But no. The Rambam says an amazing thing. The second you appoint yourself a teacher, even if you're smarter than him, even if you're more spiritual from him, but if you really say, I'm going to accept teaching from this person, the Creator has to give him teaching for you. He will receive more wisdom even than maybe he has, just because you've appointed him. But he says, you on your own will never receive that wisdom. You have to appoint for yourself somebody who you say is somebody I'm going to learn from, somebody I'm going to receive from, and then the Creator will send through him to you teachings. Which is a very, I think, both inspiring and an amazing revelation. That the amount of wisdom we receive from our teacher is not dependent on the level of our teacher even, or the level of wisdom that they have. Because as he says, if you appoint for yourself a teacher who's not as wise as you, who is not as learned as you will still be receiving, the Creator will still be giving to him for you greater wisdom than you can ever receive yourself, greater direction than ever you can receive yourself, greater removal of doubt than ever you can receive yourself. But, Yaseh lecha rav. You have to say, I'm appointing this person. It could be the lowest person in the world, the most unlearned person in the world, the most unwise person in the world. You appoint for him a teacher. The Creator has to send wisdom through him to you. It's an amazing, amazing understanding. This, we can understand, is why when at that time the first battle with Amalek occurred, the person chosen to be the leader of the battle, which represents, of course, not so much the physical battle, but the spiritual battle, was Yehoshua, was Joshua. Because of that entire generation, they all saw Moses as a great leader. They probably even saw them to some degree or another as their teacher. But there was only one person who appointed Moses no matter what. And that was Joshua, Yehoshua. It says about Yehoshua, U'misharto Yehoshua binu na'ar lo yamish mitoch ha'orel. Joshua, no matter what, others who were maybe wiser than Joshua, others who were more spiritually elevated than Joshua. Joshua said, I appoint Moses to be my teacher, and therefore, no matter what, I will study from him. And therefore, when it came time to fight the battle against Amalek, the battle against doubt, Joshua was chosen. Because the only way, this is something we have to be clear about, the only way to battle against the force of doubt, the force of negativity, which is Amalek, is by appointing for yourself a teacher. Somebody who you say, and again, as it's clear now, it doesn't have to be necessarily somebody who is wiser than you or more elevated than you, although that helps. But once you appoint a teacher, you have the zchut already, the merit already, to be separated from doubt, and you also, more important than that, receive, the Creator is forced to give to that person the wisdom and direction that you need through him or her. With this we can understand, in the special portion of the Haftarah from the prophets that we read, in the portion of Zachor, there's the famous story, it's a terribly sad story, of the king Saul, Shaul, who was probably more elevated than King David, who received the kingdom after he fell. The Kabbalists explain what was the mistake of Shaul, who was tremendously elevated soul, tremendously wise soul. He did not appoint Samuel, the prophet, to be his teacher. He learned from him, he received from him, he sometimes would ask him questions, but he also knew that he knew. And when it came time to do the battle with Agag, the king of Amalek, which represented less the physical battle, more the spiritual battle, he fell. He made his own mind up without asking Samuel, and therefore he fell. And therefore he lost what's called the kingdom, and therefore the force of Amalek was able to continue in our world. We learn from there that the force, the action that has the power to defeat Amalek, the action that has the power to remove doubt from our lives and from the world, is only when a person appoints a teacher. And therefore it says about King David an amazing thing. He had a teacher, his name was Mephibosheth. King David himself was a very wise man, very elevated soul. But it says that after King David finished his day and he made decisions and he helped people, he did all kinds of things. It says in the Talmud, Kol ma she'ani oseh, King David says, absolutely everything that I do, ani nimlach b'Mefiboshet. I ask Mefiboshet. ואומר לו מפיבושת רבי, יפה דנתי, יפה חייבתי, יפה זיכיתי, יפה טיהרתי, יפה טימאתי ולא בושתי. Even though King David is the king, and everybody comes to him for decisions, and he decides on everything, at the end of the day, he goes to his teacher, and he doesn't care who else is there, and he says, I did this, is it okay? I did this, is this okay? I did this, is this okay? I ask him, he says, King David says, absolutely everything, and I'm not embarrassed. Most people would be embarrassed. You're the king already, you're wise already, you're going to asking this guy, who, by the way, was on a lower spiritual level than King David, doesn't make a difference. Why did King David receive what's called the kingdom, that elevated position, a spiritual position more than physical, and Shaul lost it? Not because Shaul was lower spiritually or had less wisdom. Only one thing. The teaching from Rabban Gamliel. Aseh lecha rav yistalek min hasafek. Appoint for yourself a teacher, and as we said, it should be very clear, this teacher does not have to be, of course it's better if he's wiser than you and more elevated spiritually than you, but that's secondary. That's why, again, there's a lot here, but Rav Ashlag explains that especially amongst students, you should always, even again, not just the teacher, you should always find somebody whom you accept for yourself as somebody who will guide you. And again, even if he's lower than you, as the Rambam says, Maimonides says, he will be given the merit, the wisdom from the Creator to give to you. And this goes both ways, which means those of us who have who are forced to, or have people who ask us, who in some way appoint us to be their guide or to be their teacher, we should know that, but it's important to know this, that it's not because you're so wise or so elevated, but rather if you, and the other side to this is for the teacher or for the guide, to have no ego about it. Because once you have ego about it, you block that direction that's coming from the Creator that should be going through you to this student. But the other side to that is that even if you feel completely inadequate, you should know that if somebody has appointed you as their teacher, you will be receiving the direction for them. You will be receiving the wisdom for them, not because you deserve it, but because this is the way the system is set up. It's very, very important teaching. Related to this, it says, and this teaching is, and I always get excited when it's a teaching that's related to Rav Ashlag. This is a teaching from one of Rav Ashlag's students. He quotes the Talmud in Kiddushin that says, Halomed al menat lelamed, if a person studies for the purpose of teaching others, maspikin be'ado lilmod ulelamed lishmo ve'lasot. The Creator will give him the ability to learn and to teach, to do, to keep, and to keep and to do. Which means the most important part of our spiritual work should be not simply to gain wisdom for ourselves or to direct our own spiritual growth, but halomed al menat lelamed. The core of our spiritual teaching and work should be that I want to give this over to somebody else. Only if a person has at the core of his purpose of study and spiritual work and growth, so that he can then give it over to somebody else, then he has the merit, lilmod ulelamed lishmor ve'lasot. Then he is given the power, the light to learn and to teach and to keep and to do. Why is this so? So he quotes what it says in the Yetz Chaim. We'll read this small section. First he says, Ki mitzad ha'elyon lo mashpi'im el ha'tachton. You never, and this is even before the physical world, in the spiritual realm, light is never given to a vessel, zulat be'et shemesugal le'hashpi'a le'acherim, only when that vessel is able to then share that light to the next vessel below it. But if you hold on to whatever light, to whatever you receive for yourself, then the light stops shining to you. Light can never be received for the vessel itself, for ourselves. We talk about how spiritually you shouldn't receive for yourself alone. Maybe in the physical world you can possibly receive for yourself alone, although of course in the long term you can't. But in the spiritual realm, you can never receive for yourself alone. When the upper vessels see that there's a vessel who's stopped for whatever reason giving to the vessel below it, the light stops shining to that vessel. Because the vessel no longer needs new light. If you want to receive new light just for yourself, it can't happen. The spiritual system is set up in such a way that light is never given to a vessel if the vessel does not have the desire and the ability to give it further to another vessel. We read the section from it's called the Shar Mati Velo Mati. It's a section of the Etz Chaim from the Ari. All the supernal sources of light turn their face, turn their desire to give light towards the lower vessels. In order to give life force and blessings and light to the lower vessels. The sources of light always desire to give light and blessings to the lower vessels, called the branches. But when the original source, called Keter, called the light of the endless world, sees that there's a vessel that is asking to receive but has no ability or desire to give that light to another vessel, then the source, which is called Keter, takes back all of its light. As it says that light, what's called of the righteous, that light that is shined down from the upper worlds is removed. When the light is not being sent down, gam hu mafsid, so to the vessel loses its light. Unless there's an awakening of desire to shine that light, that blessing, further down. When the vessel is not giving down to the lower vessel, then the supernal source, the endless light, says, I have to take my light back. But it's not that the endless world, the Creator, does not want to give that light, but rather, but because the light, of course, desires always to give. But because there's no further vessel that desires to share it, therefore the light has to be removed. So the Ari teaches us very, very important understanding. Whenever you desire to receive for yourself, again, as we said, in the physical world, you can possibly receive for yourself, at least for some time. But in the supernal world, in the spiritual realm, light can never be received only for the vessel. Whenever, and this is what the Ari says, whenever the source of light, call it the endless world, call it the Creator, sees that there's a vessel who's desiring to receive only for itself, not only will it not receive new light, but all light that it has already received will slowly be taken away from it. This is the secret, as he says, the verse, Hatzadik Avad, when there is that desire to share is removed from the vessel, not only will the vessel never be able to draw new light, but also any light that it has, it slowly begins being taken away from it. Rav Ashlag in his teachings, and here the Ari, always give us a clear understanding of how the spiritual realm works. And this is maybe a new teaching, but needs to be a clear teaching. In the spiritual realm, a vessel can never receive for itself. It can only receive to the degree that it desires to share this with others. With this we can understand what it says in the Talmud in Kiddushin, that if a person studies for himself, he does not merit to keep the wisdom, he certainly does not even merit to do the spiritual work. But if at the core of a person's spiritual work is the desire to give the wisdom over to others, to give the light over to others, to give the blessings over to others, then he or she receives that endless light. And this is why it says that when a person desires to study, never for him or herself, but rather to give this light and this wisdom over to others, then he merits to learn to teach, to keep, and to do. He goes on to speak how with this teaching, of course, there has to be a humility that comes with it. He brings a story of one of the Kabbalists from a few hundred years ago who was going to receive the permission from his teacher to teach others. And as before he's getting ready to give him, the teacher, to give his student permission now to teach, he tells him the following story. He said that once there was a king who had in one of his palaces a beautiful room that he wanted to be painted, to be made beautiful. So he takes 3 of the best artists, and he says, I want you, he gives them 3 walls, 1 wall each, and he says, I want you to paint the wall, and each one of you in your own special and unique way, make it beautiful. So one of them, and he gives them a month, starts working, the second one starts working, and they're painting their walls, and they're beautiful. The third one doesn't do anything for the entire month. And they're all looking at him like, the king's not going to be very happy. The other 2 artists for the whole month are working and working and working. On the last day of the month, which is the day before the king comes, the 3rd artist doesn't paint anything, doesn't do anything, except he fills the entire 3rd wall with a mirror. So that now the 2 murals created by the other 2 artists shine through his mirror. And the teacher in the story tells the student, this is the way a true teacher has to be, which means, as we said earlier, the teacher needs to know that nothing that he is receiving is for him, and nothing is because of him. But rather, he is simply a mirror that the light of the Creator shines for that other person through him. And only when a person is truly able to know this, then he's able to be a teacher. Which means, again, only to the degree that you know that whatever you're receiving not for yourself or because you've earned it or because you should have it, but rather only as a ma'avar, only as a conduit towards others, then you merit to receive it. So with these 2 teachings, Rav Ashleg's student tells us, this is how you can guarantee both to learn, to know, to keep, and to do. And therefore, as we learned earlier how a person needs to appoint a teacher. On the other hand, if all of us also need to be a teacher to somebody, but to be a teacher, you have to know these 2 things. First, that everything that you do, both in study and in spiritual work, has to be for the purpose of giving it over. And second, like in the story in the mirror, you have to know that the only way that you can be a teacher is if you see yourself as having nothing but simply being a mirror, but the Creator has given us the merit to be a conduit for this person or these people who have made us a teacher to them. And if you're able to keep both of these in mind, then you're able to be a teacher. You're able to be a conduit. And this, he says, is the meaning of the first verse in this week's portion. Moses achieved this ultimate level. He really thought that everything that he received was not because of himself. Ve'amar lo Hashem yitbarach ve'ata tetzaveh. Tetzaveh means become, it means a few things, but it also means become unified with. Et bnei Yisrael, שתתחבר ותכלול עמהם יחד, להיות בצוותא חדא. Make yourself unified with the Israelites. ואז ממילא יהיה לבך עוד שבור ביותר. You'll even achieve a higher level of humility. כי התלמידים יגרמו לך שמלמעלה ישפיע עליך רב אור. You'll even receive more light, but you'll keep knowing, Moses, that this light that you're receiving is not for yourself, but rather as a mirror towards the light that the Creator is giving to your students, to the Israelites in this portion. And only in this way, not so much for Moses, but more important for us, the Creator is giving us the secrets of both being a student and being a teacher. As I said, there's a lot more here. Maybe on Shabbat we'll get to more of the details, but these 3 teachings on this Shabbat are fundamental, and they are what gives us the strength for what the Shabbat of Zachor is about and what the Shabbat of Purim, what the Shabbat before Purim is about. To really do this battle, to understand the battle, and to be a student and a teacher able to not only do the battle for ourselves, but more importantly, give the strength to others to do this battle. Shabbat Shalom.